Good morning, everyone who's here to join us today. It's bite-sized conversations, normally with our digital BFF, Kylie Mowbray Allen, but she's not here today. She is on a plane to New Zealand for a wedding. Lucky her. And today I'm so excited. We have Jason Timor from 2.co. Good morning, Jason. How are you today?
Good morning, Jenny. I'm good. Sunny day here in Dharawal country. So paying my respects to those traditional custodians and respect to all of our elders past and present. But yeah, it's good to join you, Jenny. Always great to see you. It's funny talking to you in a different capacity without normal, off the cuff yarns, but very happy to be involved today. So thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. Yeah, and I'm coming from the amazing Yagara Turrbal country in Brisbane, and I too pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And I'm so excited because we talk a lot about culture, and we've had some amazing conversations and yarns around philosophy and the ethos of our businesses and building culture. And I thought, what a great way for us to chat, as you said, in a different capacity about, how to build culture in a business, because it's something that we don't often think about. But before we get started, I would love you to share with people. Most people know who I am, Jenny from Elephant in the Room Consulting. I'm a business coach specializing in small to medium businesses and business strategy. But who are you, Jason? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, Jenny, thank you. All of my mob are from TI, Torres Straits, way up north, Thursday Island, Badu Island. I was born and raised in Murray country in Mackay, but living in here in Dharawal country for over, well, a long time now, but I'm still a Queenslander, so that hasn't changed. We, the director and co-founder of 2.co, which is an 100% Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander owned Indigenous engagement consultancy. We have a full complement of First Nations people in our team as well. And basically what we do is help organisations, public, private sector, navigate their way through Indigenous engagement strategy. And that takes on a lot of forms. That could be through reconciliation action plans. It also could be through employment strategies, procurement. Also, people connect with us if they're looking at needing help to engage with mob, wherever that might be, whether it's relating to infrastructure projects or wanting to get a feel for the voice of communities around certain aspects. So we help people with their approaches to community and some guiding principles around that. So both from our lived experience as blackfellas, but also with some sensibilities and sensitivities around how do you approach community? How do you make sure there's reciprocity in that as well? So we have some very talented people in the team, people who make me look very good. We get to work with great people like Microsoft and TikTok, Lend-Lease, Department of Education, we're doing some great stuff with as well. So a lot to keep us busy. Before this role, I was the Deputy CEO of Supply Nation, which is the peak body of the Indigenous business sector here in Australia. And that was a great role working for a not-for-profit, really understanding what it takes to be a business owner as well from a blackfellas perspective. And before that, Qantas for a few years, heading up their Indigenous strategy, where I got to fly business class for a while, but no longer.
No longer.
I go to 27B now, so I've forgotten about it.
That's actually around, mine's 25. So I like that you're 27. I like that space. That's my favorite part of the cabin on the bigger jets, I have to say.
It's all right. We're all going the same place anyway, so it doesn't matter.
You do underplay a little bit what 2.co do, and you are a phenomenal organization. And I met you about 6 months ago, I think, on a similar conversation or a panel discussion. And what I love about this topic that we're going to talk about today, which is around building culture in business, you and I have multiple lenses of the term culture. And I was talking to someone just recently about the use of the term culture, and someone said, "Can we stop talking about culture in essentially a traditional institutionalized model of what culture looks like in an organization?" Because for us, culture is kind of an everyday thing, how we operate, how we engage the world, how we think, how we work with community. But in the context, and a lot of the people who watch our video and watch this conversation each week, we have on the podcast or the YouTube channel, is we talk about small business or building strong, sustainable businesses. And for us, culture is our foundation. So how would you describe culture in an organization for people who might be listening today?
Yeah, I'm glad you said it has very different dimensions depending on what is important to you when you're describing culture. So in its traditional sense, culture and organizations around how we act, what's accepted, what is the expectation from me as an employee when I'm working in this organization, how comfortable are we with certain terminology, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But when you look at it from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective, culture is also about the genuine authenticity of how you are, um, expressing yourself in a cultural sense as well. So what I mean by that is, and just to put the very hard lens on that, is decolonizing everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's important for us as well in terms of what our core business is. It's helping organizations, as I mentioned, to navigate Indigenous engagement, but we have to do that in a way that is different from the mainstream. Otherwise, there's no value in what we're doing. So culture for us also means that we are approaching certain problems and solutions for our partners that have a cultural perspective. So for instance, yesterday we were at a workshop. The first part of the workshop is, stand and deliver, death by PowerPoint, do the activity. But the last part, when became the most valuable, with the CEO in the room and her direct reports, is that we got rid of the PowerPoints, we got rid of the tables and chairs, and we sat in a circle to talk about the actual issues around implementing a strategy, for instance. So that meant for us that the signal to the 2.0 and our organization and our employees is that we must be able to demonstrate that perspective in what we're doing and what we're delivering. And that actually held a lot of value for our partners.
Yeah.
So that's the external sense. But internally, building a culture at 2.0 is also respecting that we have a different way that we look at family, for instance, or what are other priorities that may be cultural obligations. They might be community obligations as well, and making sure that everything that we design in our processes, systems, everything reflect our commitment to making sure that everybody has the room, freedom to express themselves as a 2.0 employee, but as also a community member, a family member who also have other obligations. So
I love when we worked together, what I loved about listening to the way that you guys talked about your culture is that idea of the philosophy or the ethos that you bring to the how you build your business. And it's not just about what you do and the behaviors and the way the processes, it's actually about how the company shows up in every aspect. And you do that in such a beautiful and consistent way. But I love those core principles that we talked around, because it gives people that grounding, that kind of root to kind of go, I can be authentic, I can turn up and be myself. I just have to make sure, and I have to continue to align myself with that core philosophy or core principles.
Yeah, you've been quite modest there, because you helped us with rediscovering all of that. And some of those principles were grounded in progressive thinking, making sure that we understand, each and every one of us as a founder and director, as well as our employees, that we need to be thinking more ahead of issues that come up rather than sit inside them.
Yeah.
It's okay to bang the drum and talk about the actual challenge itself, but you can't live in that challenge in that particular moment. And I think sometimes it's easy to stay there. So what's the actual value of thinking beyond the problem and thinking progressively? How can we actually do something different? What's something people haven't thought of? Now that's particularly important when we're talking about issues that affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. We're lucky enough to be able to pitch for some work with the National Indigenous Australians Agency around research and evaluation. So there's a good chance for us to flex some of our philosophy around that. What's not working? Why hasn't it been working for ages in terms of program and policy? So we're pushing the team always to think further and further and further. And sometimes that hurts a little bit, but that's the stretch.
But I think what's also, and again, you're being modest about the way that the organization's developed, is because if we think about culture, and when I very first started doing my very first love was organizational change and development. That was my uni degree. That's what I focused on. And I looked at a lot around how to build that traditional, institutionalized structure or culture in an organization. And we focused on things like values and norms of behavior. And words like teamwork and collaborative and, you know, open door policy and those traditional, very vanilla ideas of culture came out. But as I've progressed through my career, and particularly owning the company now, and even talking with Kylie when we talk about the way she develops her culture, it's actually around all those other aspects of how we describe. So that idea about being progressive and being open-minded and having that, you know, a different lens and being able to look at perspectives are all part of the culture, but they're not the language that we tend to use when we have strategic planning around what is my culture. And I did that recently, having a conversation with another business earlier this week. And I just said to them, what do you want your team to look like? So instead of saying what's the culture that we want to create or what are the values of the team, I just said, what do you want to look like? How do you want to show up? Because we forget that grounding piece sometimes, don't we? We want to kind of have these beautiful statements, but what does it look like for somebody working in a business day to day, having a team and showing up for their partners or clients?
Yeah, that's right. And I think sometimes people don't have the permission to do that in other organizations. From my own experience, without naming any organizations, of course, but at times you didn't feel like you had the opportunity to be free and open and progressive around your thinking and ways to, you know, solve a problem, for instance, because look, to be totally honest, when you're working in a huge organization, there are a lot of egos, there's a lot of hierarchy, there's a lot of people who have a skin in the game for certain things, and they don't sometimes want another progressive voice coming up through the ranks, because that's just the nature of some of people and organizations. So for us, I would hate to think anyone in our team felt that they couldn't speak up. And one of our team members, we were on an inception meeting. So we just started a project with a government agency, and we were talking about community engagement. We're doing a community engagement framework, and this employee of ours was speaking very succinctly, very articulate around what the actual project was. And then afterwards, she sent me a team message saying, "Oh, I hope I didn't talk too much. Is that okay?" And I wrote back, "What are you talking about? I want you to make sure that you feel like you can always feel empowered, and just that's, you know, inject yourself into the yarn, because that's what you're here for. Don't ever feel like it's not your place to talk because I'm talking to a senior person in the government agency. I don't really care about what your title is. I care about what the outcome is. And that's another thing about what I want. I'd hope all of our employees in the team think about this whole construct of this. My title is, you know, the group manager and director of this. That's awesome. But what are we trying to solve here? Let's focus on the beneficiaries and the stuff we're trying to do.
And I've noticed though, I must say over the sort of 25 odd years since I did my original degree and we looked at culture, the way culture is looked at, I think organizationally has changed for a lot of companies, because now we think about it's not just about the culture at the top being permeated down. And we used to talk about you get the culture right at the top and then that's demonstrated down and will flow down and people will live and breathe that. But we know that's not true. We know that each individual team or organization or branch within a broader organization has its own culture and has its own style and its own way of showing and its way of being. And so I love that when I talk to organizations now or individuals to say, what do you want your organization to look like or be, or how do you want your business to grow? Understanding that first piece of how do we show up, what do we look like, is always the first conversation I have with my clients. If you were working with a company about building culture, what would be the first element you would focus on?
The element I'd focus on is how are you modeling the behavior that you'd like to see.
Oh, I love that.
And I've learned that, and I've had to learn that quickly myself. I mean, when it was myself and Tiff, who, bless her, is on maternity leave at the moment, I think she may be dialing in. So don't be surprised if she gets a comment, puts a comment in saying, "Stop talking BS." But when it was just me,
you can do that.
Yeah, that's right. But when it was me and Tiff, we started the business 3-4 years ago with the knowledge that we were comfortable working with each other, and we already knew what our principles and values were. Sorry about that noise. Sounds like someone's in the dentist. But So that was easy. We knew how each other worked. We'd work with each other at Qantas. But when we started to get people in the organization, we had to articulate what's the secret recipe for 2.co, but then continue to model that behavior in everything we said or do. So it wasn't about, all right, it wasn't like, okay, we have to remember that there's someone else watching, we got to be mindful. We operate how we operate, but it's just, we have to continually make sure that we're sharing that philosophy in everything we do. So that would be my first step, is making sure you do a bit of a behavior audit on yourself. I mean, are you honestly displaying some of those behaviors you'd like to see in others? And if you don't, you can't tell others to do that. You simply can't. That's ridiculous.
And in fact, if we think about organizations that I'm sure we've worked with or been with, or even sometimes when we're developing our own organization, we have those stumbling blocks because we recognize that we have this aspirational view of what our culture should look like. But then when it's not demonstrated or lived every day, it becomes, you feel like you're almost in somebody else's play or someone else's kind of, story, where you're not feeling aligned to the culture. And that's often where you get that mismatch of people in organizations, or you get kind of conflict in the teams, because there is that misalignment between what we expect and what we do. So it's such an important point to have that alignment early on when you're having those conversations.
Yeah, and it even becomes even more important now because of the war on talent, particularly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander talent in organizations. For me, what I've seen from other blackfellas who are looking for work and people who are working with 2.co, they don't care what your brand is. They don't care how many people you have. They don't care how much money you make as an organization. They care about how safe it is to work at your organization. And can I get involved in some really cool stuff and feel empowered to make sure that my input is valued as well, from a cultural perspective, but also just as a human being as well. And that's becoming more important.
And I was talking about that with a company that I'm working with at the moment, and we were talking about culturally safe. And so what culturally safe looks like is often the lens has been done as a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kind of lens of having a cultural safe for people who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait coming into a kind of large global company. But we actually expanded that and said the whole organization needs to feel culturally safe. The whole team needs to be culturally safe. So when we're bringing our own values and ideas and beliefs to the table, that we're able to share that without that judgment. In fact, when I did the exercise I mentioned earlier on Tuesday, Wednesday with this team, they said we want non-judgmental in our team. We want to be able to share our ideas and nothing be discounted or be dismissed, because it's our idea, and we want to have the opportunity to share that and feel safe about doing that. And so that culturally safe, although often related only to a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander world, actually fits beautifully in a mainstream world, because it creates equity across everybody to say we're all valued and we're all important at the table.
Yeah, that's right. And I think sometimes as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, we forget how valuable our perspective is. So you might be in a meeting, and I've seen this myself. You might be in a meeting and feel a bit intimidated by non-Indigenous people who seem to know what they're talking about, and everyone's talking the same language, and you're sort of sitting there going, okay, well, why am I here? But then you start talking about your experience and your perspective as a blackfella, and then suddenly people switch onto that, because you forget that most other non-Indigenous people don't have that lived experience of you as a First Nations person as well. Yep. I've seen that happen with other interns that I've worked with at Qantas, for instance, how they've sort of been very insecure about why they're in the room, in the meeting, and then when they're asked to tell their story, they capture the whole room. So they, like you said, being able to be safe enough to do that. But once you do, you forget how your different perspective is valuable to others as well.
So if and it's a general question, and I probably know the answers to. So how important is it for particularly a small business? Because a lot of the people who listen to us are small businesses. How important is it for small businesses to think about their culture when they start, even before they get employment? Like, does it really matter? It's just me. Why do I have to think about my culture now if I'm not going to grow with lots of people and for a couple of years? What difference does it make?
I think the expression of your culture is also about, from our experience, it's about your value proposition as well as an organization, or what you do. There's what you do and there's how you do it. And funny enough, how you do it becomes more attractive to people who want to work with you. So an example of that is I had to pitch for work last week for a pretty minor job. Both organizations had the same offering, myself and another competitor who I really respect and love that outfit. So it was sort of difficult on paper to go, well, which one should I go with this is a real estate, industrial real estate organization.
Yeah.
But they called me back and said, well, they want to work with you because they feel like you're someone they could work with.
Yeah.
And that's hard to wrap your hands around. I'm grateful to take on the job, and that's really great feedback. But to answer your question, how you do stuff is just, or even more important, is around what you do.
Yeah.
As well. So if you're a solo operator, if you've got 2 people, 6, 10, 100, culture is also about that behavior and how people connect with that as well. So that's what I've learned. Saying, if I don't need a culture, if it's just me, well, people notice every single thing that you do, not just that report that you're delivering, down the track. It's how did you go? How was that working with Jason, for instance,
it's splitting off that how from the practicality of the how in terms of the processes and systems and the mechanics and the mechanics of the how, to the sensing and feeling and kind of how you show up as a person, how. And we often don't split those two out. And I know the way you said that then has made me go, have I actually thought about it in that separation? But I love that, because it provides a tangibility for people to actually think about, how do I show up on both sides, both in the physical delivery as well as the way that I do that, and how I'm engaging with them, and how engaged I am, but the values that I'm bringing and the beliefs that I'm bringing and the way that I kind of carry myself in that room is all part of that how.
Yeah. Every second, every interaction, every second of the interaction, people are picking up on all of these sort of body language, everything, right through to me being really honest when I'm on a call with the CEO and their reports, and saying, look, I'm really sorry, I've got kids walking behind me, there's a renovation going on, there's there's human stuff. So I'm not just, and also that's just really about, what we're talking about is important when I'm with a partner or a client, but also we're humans, we're all trying to do this. I think trying to make sure that you're connecting with people all the time. That's something that we try to do all the time, is on a human level as well. Because we have to try and get people to think about our perspective and the disparity, disadvantage, for instance, but also get people to really think about things in a different way. And you can't do that if you can't connect.
No, and I think it's such an important piece, because when we just talk about culture in an organization, as I said, it's, we think about, if we look back at the way we describe organizations, this organization had a culture of, they use words like a culture of leadership or a culture of bullying if it's a negative culture, or a culture of openness, or they had a really strong culture, and we describe them in these kind of vague statements. But when we talk about why they had that and we think about it, well, you're right, it's all that interaction, from the way the teams show up, the way they connect, the way they deliver their work, the respect that they have for each other, and all those little elements build up a culture. And if we don't build that up and particularly the small business, and I've got myself at the moment, I've got some associates that I work with, and I have my amazing Macy who helps me out with all our marketing and social media work. And so I want us to feel like we're a team, and that she can tell me things, and that we're open, but also that there's a growth mindset, that there's this idea that we were always learning. And that's really important for me. And hopefully if she's watching, that she feels like that. But because that's what's important to me, that feeling of safety and confidence and comfort and growth in an organization. But so often we don't see companies build their culture from that mindset.
Yeah, and email signature and business card. I don't even know if people use business cards anymore, but I've got a whole stack of them, and I think the answer to that question is no, because I've still got 2 boxes of them. But it says direct. It says director, but that's another sort of construct as well, title.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're talking about culture and in small business, I'm going to be mindful that, and anyone has to be mindful that that title is important, but it actually means nothing, particularly if you want to be able to learn from your employees as well. And the people who work at 2.co are incredible. All Aboriginal women, mind you, just so you know. That's a great thing. I just wish we had some more male representation, but there's a lot to learn from my co-founder.
You'll be making a comment about that.
Yeah, our senior consultants as well. I mean, their experience is quite different to mine. There's a lot for me to learn. So if I can't be humble enough and think, yep, that I've got to make sure that strip away this founder director title and learn from these other women as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to do. You can beat your chest and say, this is 2.co. I built this from the ground and it's such a great success. But the minute you start getting the ego involved is the minute that you start getting in trouble around being respectful and being open and willing to learn from others and
100%.
all of that as well. And I learn every day from the people that who are in our team as well.
Yeah. So what would you say, and just aware of time, but what would you say are the top 3 things that organizations or individuals starting a company or growing their business want to think about? I'm putting you on the spot here, but the 3 things that they should consider when building their culture.
Well, that first one, as I mentioned, is just have a bit of a behavior audit and make sure you're modeling the behavior you'd like to see in others, and that. I think the second is being mindful that everyone has their own story. They're coming from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Their obligations in their family or community may be different than yours, and making sure you're super sensitive and super flexible around that. But of course, being able to deliver what you need to deliver as well. But so that's that sensitivity around diversity of family and differences and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But also the third one for me, and which you've helped us with, Jenny, which I'm so grateful for, is making sure you're able to articulate that philosophy or the things that underpin your culture, because it does 2 things. The first thing is it gets people to align and to what you were trying to do internally.
Yeah.
But externally, I think, as I mentioned before, it's actually a value proposition as to why we should work with you.
Yeah.
So
I love that one. I'm actually going to borrow that one as a gift from you. I hope that's okay. But I love that idea that your culture is part of your value proposition and how you show up. I think that is as a takeaway and as a bite-sized comment from today, is that your culture is part of your value proposition is so important and really can be a game changer for organizations, as you talked about with your, with the pitch you did last week when you're looking between 2 organizations. That piece makes a difference and people recognize it and they observe it, don't they? We feel it when we work with somebody who has a good culture versus someone who may be exceptional at what they do, but that doesn't have that feeling or sense of safety or kind of connectedness with us.
Yeah, that's right. And, and sometimes it takes a bit of a while to try and discover that, because if you're a sole operator, you're starting and go, this is the way I operate. But then, and as you know, that you've helped us, like, how do I pull out these things that make up me?
Yeah, correct.
And then put that back together and go, this is how we like to operate.
I love it. Thank you so much for the conversation. We could actually chat for hours, as we always do.
Yeah.
If people want to learn a little bit more about 2.co or get in contact with you, what is the best way they can do that?
Yeah, we're all on the social channels, but on the website, 2.co.com. We've got a QR code on our banners now, so but you can't do that thing. Our LinkedIn, Facebook, and Insta we're on as well. And I'd love to have you on. We'll share the
links in the chat anyway.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on and share any advice that we can as well. But really, thanks for inviting me, Jenny. I mean, you yourself and Elephant in the Room have been a huge wind behind our sails at 2.co this year. So
very kind.
Thank you as well.
That's lovely. For those who want to catch up with me, Elephant in the Room AU on social, on LinkedIn and Facebook and Insta, you can come and find us. We also have lots of cool things like programs running, retreats, lots of fun things that we get to do. So anybody who wants to reach out, remember, if you want to listen back to this later, we're on the podcast, we've got the YouTube channel, and also don't forget, we've got hellomedia.team is where you find, and hellomedia.dreamteam, where you find Kylie, our digital BFF, who will be landing very soon in New Zealand and watching this back later. Thank you so much, Jason. Absolute pleasure, everyone. Great to see you again, and we hope to see you next Friday. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, Jenny.
See you later. Thanks, Jason.